All right, so today we're going to jump into one of the oldest questions out there. What exactly is philosophy? It sounds pretty simple, right? But believe me, the answer is anything but. Let's get into it. So let's just put it right out there on the table. What is philosophy? The thing is, if you ask 10 professional philosophers, you're probably going to get 10 totally different answers. And that's not, a failure of the discipline. It's actually one of its most defining features. Yup, you heard that right. For over 2,000 years, some of the absolute greatest minds in history have been doing philosophy without ever agreeing on a single universal definition. It's a field where its own nature is a subject of its own debate. Wild, huh? Okay, so to get our heads around this whole thing, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at philosophy's so-called identity crisis. Then we'll explore what it's even searching for, break down its three core pillars, and finally, check out the great questions that keep it going. All right, first up, that central problem. Most fields, they know what they are. Biology, study of life. Physics, study of matter and energy. Simple. But for philosophy, the very act of defining itself is a philosophical exercise. And this quote just nails it. The first problem of philosophy is philosophy itself. This isn't some new issue either. It's been this central challenge from the very beginning. See, philosophy is a critical discipline that turns its own tools back on itself, constantly asking, what's my purpose? What are my methods? What am I? It's a feature, not a bug.
Okay, so if there's no single definition, what in the world have philosophers been thinking they were doing all this time? Well, they've been on a search for sure, but the object of that search, that's been described in a whole lot of different ways.
Let's start at the beginning with the original definition from the ancient Greeks. The word itself, philosophy, literally means the love of wisdom. But for the Greeks, wisdom wasn't just about knowing a bunch of facts. No, it was about the ability to draw real meaning from experience, to see beyond the surface of things. So early on, this love of wisdom led to a very specific quest, the search for ultimate reality. Think of it like this. A potter can make a cup, a plate, and a vase, right? But if you smash them all, you're just left with clay. Philosophers like Thales were asking, what is the universe's clay? What's the one basic stuff that everything else is made of? Now, this is related to the search for reality, but with a bit of a twist. It's not just about what exists, but about finding the truth, with a capital T. A truth so fundamental it would sit above all the other truths you might find in physics or biology or even religion. It's a hunt for the ultimate principle that explains, well, everything. But philosophy isn't always about these huge, abstract ideas. For thinkers like Socrates, it was deeply, deeply practical. He believed the whole point was to search for the ideal life and then actually live it. His core idea was that to know what is good is to be good. Philosophy for him was a guide for how to live a virtuous, meaningful life. So we've seen what philosophers are searching for, but how do they do it? Well, they use a kind of toolkit, and it's made up of three core branches or pillars of inquiry. And here they are, the big three. Metaphysics, which asks, what is real? Then there's epistemology, which asks, okay, but how can we know it? And finally, based on all that, ethics asks, so how should we act? Pretty much every single philosophical question you can think of falls into one of these categories. Okay, let's make these pillars a little more concrete, because the real power of philosophy isn't in these abstract labels, it's in the profound, timeless questions these branches ask. Questions that, let's be honest, we all grapple with in our own lives. Let's start with metaphysics. The philosopher Martin Heidegger famously asked this monster of a question. Why is there something and not nothing? It's not just what's the world made of, it's why does the world exist at all? I mean, wow, that question gets right to the very heart of existence and our tiny little place in it. And of course, there are no easy answers here. Answering a question like that leads to completely different ways of seeing the world. For instance, you have materialists who argue that reality is only physical stuff, atoms, energy, that's it. But then you have idealists who say, nope, reality is fundamentally mental or spiritual. I mean, the answers could not be more different. All right, on to the second pillar, epistemology. Once we ask what's real, the very next logical question is, how can we be so sure? This branch of philosophy poses a question that can seriously keep you up at night. Can we ever know anything for certain? Epistemology really digs deep into these problems. It forces us to examine the very foundations of what we think we know. I mean, think about it. You know the sun will rise tomorrow, but how do you really know? Is it just based on past experience, scientific laws? What if you're in a simulation right now? See, epistemology explores the absolute limits of our understanding. And that brings us to our third pillar, ethics, which asks what is arguably the most personal and practical philosophical question of all. Every single day, we make choices that reflect our answer to this. What is the right way to live? How should we behave toward ourselves and toward other people? Ethics forces us to confront the basis of our morality. Is it always wrong to lie? I mean, what if you're lying to protect someone's feelings? Is that wrong? Ethics asks if there's some universal standard for right and wrong, where our moral principles even come from, and why we should even bother being good in the first place. So, after all this, what is philosophy? Well, maybe the answer isn't a neat little definition, but a process. Maybe philosophy's true value isn't in finding one final perfect answer, but in learning how to ask the questions, how to think critically, how to challenge assumptions, and how to explore life's biggest mysteries for yourself. And that's really where we land. Philosophy isn't just something that a bunch of ancient Greeks did in togas. It's an active, ongoing process of self-examination that asks you to consider the most fundamental questions of all. So I'll just leave you with this one. What is your position in the scheme of things? Where do you come from, and where are you going? The search for that answer, well, that is philosophy.